Hello and welcome back to the Toffee Blues YouTube channel, your source for all things Everton, and welcome back to the dawn of a new Premier League season. Feels like only yesterday that we got the sweet release of a break over the summer. But I don't know about you, but I'm starting to get a bit bored. I definitely need the football back. And Ellis Nordhoff now joins me 72 days since Abdoulaye Doucouré saved us from relegation. And I don't know about you, Ellis, but watching Leeds walk out against Coventry and no, sorry, Leicester walk out against Coventry and Leeds walk out to get out against Cardiff, I kind of felt that relief all over again.
I'm so glad we weren't playing on that Friday night with Southampton and then the day after. I'm glad to have that extra week to wait without football because it just means we're in the Premier League, which we need to be in.
Yeah, and that is what we will be discussing today. We're going to be kind of going through a bit of a preview, maybe some predictions. I'm sure we'll round off with some bold predictions. I was just talking to Ellis before we start recording. He's a bit nervous about his, so we'll have to see how they get on later on. But we may as well kick off with the transfer window, Ellis. We knew it would be a quiet one. We knew that the club didn't have a tremendous amount of money, which was confusing when we seemed to be offering 30 million for El Bilal Toure, who then went off to Atalanta. At the time of recording, we've still not brought in a striker. I know Yusuf Chamiti is maybe a matter of minutes away. We don't currently know, but he's not going to be a starting striker. So there's still some big weaknesses in the team, but not a terrible transfer window so far. If we could bring in a few more names.
Yeah, I definitely think we need more. And I probably would have thought we might have had a few more at this point. But what we've brought in so far is okay. But the thing that I'm quite pleased about is the type of target we've been looking at. El Bilal Toure fits the profile of a young player with like a ceiling that he can improve on and a player who we can make money on in the future. Yusuf Chamiti's the same. He might be that year before El Bilal Toure, so we don't know how ready he's actually going to be. So I'd be looking for another striker after that, of course. But so far, Dan Juma coming in, I think that's an absolutely fantastic loan signing. A player we probably couldn't get a player of his quality on a permanent because I imagine he's worth more than that. And then Ashley Young is just pure experience, isn't he? And it seems now that he might be our starting left back. So I'm quite pleased so far, but we absolutely need more. We can't go into the season when the transfer window closes with what we've got now because we are still light.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's nice to see the club seemingly working off a profile of player for once when we've kind of randomly brought in players. I mean, Neil Maupay last summer to fill in for Calvert-Lewin, a completely different profile of player, and we saw how much that hurt us. Not only because Maupay seemed to refuse to hit the net, but he scored one goal last season, but he's not a player who's similar in build and stature to Calvert-Lewin. It looks like Chamiti might be that kind of player, but as he said, a relatively unproven. Some sporting fans seemed quite surprised when it kind of broke that we were signing him. So I'm not unhappy with the window so far. I think Ashley Young was a really solid signing. I mean, on the face of it, at 38-year-old, it kind of seems like same old Everton. But the experience that he brings in, he played plenty of games for Aston Villa in their tremendous season last year, ending up qualifying for the Europa Conference. So. And Dan Juma, I mean, it's easy to when it was coming back out to the sheen's kind of been taken off it a bit after the January debacle, but I don't blame him at all for ending up going to Spurs. I mean, the club was in turmoil. It seemed like Frank Lampard was in charge of persuading him to come to the club, and then we didn't know if he was going to be sacked, and then inevitably was, as we always do things last minute in the transfer window. But so far, it's been all right. I definitely agree that we need more striking reinforcements. I'm sure we'll get onto that today as well. Looks like we've rumoured to sign Patson Daka now from Leicester. There's been the perennial rumours for Iheanacho, but I think it's what a 6 out of 10 so far, which feels good to say, to be honest, because we've had some absolutely stinking transfer windows in the past, but not overwhelmingly confident for the season. But I don't know about you, but I feel slightly better than I did coming out of the back of the last one.
I think the main reason why we feel better is the manager above everything else. I think
Mm.
starting with Sean Dyche, who knows what it's all about. He knows what a relegation battle's about. He knows how to steer teams away from it. And often his Burnley teams weren't actually embroiled in late relegation battles. He had them out of it before then. And my hope this season is that we aren't in a deep relegation battle. And I think purely having him, he is probably the best signing we could have made because Sean Dyche is the one who's probably going to keep us up above everything. We definitely need more players, like you say. And I would have probably hoped that by Saturday we would have had a striker who can start because we obviously don't know what the score is with Calvert-Lewin. He's saying he's fit. Dyche is saying he's not ready to start yet. And I feel like if Neil Maupay does start on Saturday, there might be elements of concern from the fans because, of course, we didn't expect this to be the case. We hope to have a striker in by now, but I'm not sure what the stance is on Chimiti, whether he's somebody who can come straight in. But if we're paying 12 to 15 million pounds, you imagine he's going to feature in the first team squad when we're quite cash strapped as we are.
Yeah, and I spoke to Aaron from Prixie with Janada about Chamiti. He was also slightly surprised, but not a player that we can expect to be hitting the ground run straight away. He's definitely going to need time. He hasn't even obviously had a slight preseason, and I mean the word raw gets thrown around I think far too easily when we're talking about young players, but that does seem to fit him. 6'4". He did play towards the back end of last season. He ended up coming back out of the team though. He scored a couple of goals, but not the not the goal scorer that potentially that we all know that we needed. We know we need a striker since Bashiri all told us that we were getting one, and way beyond that. But it will be interesting to see how he gets on. But we may as well drop one of our bold predictions pretty early on in the video. Ellis, where do you think we're going to finish?
I'm going with 12th, and I think that is a bold prediction because a lot of people are probably going to say lower, but I do think that the quality of the league from 10th and below is very poor, and I feel like you could easily get to the top of that pile with not too many signings and just simply being an organised, functional team. And I think that's one guarantee under Dyche, you will be a functional team. So for me, I don't think 12 would actually be that far off, and I think it would be a very good season because that's the stability we need going into the new stadium.
Yeah, no, I a few years ago, I never really expected myself to say I just want a really boring season where we're comfortably safe. We pick up what 10, 12 wins, we're on 40 points towards the end of the season. But as he said, that's absolutely what we need. I'm not as confident as you. I'm not sure we'll end up as high as 12th, but it's so hard to tell. I mean, we saw the league at the end of last season because there were so few points between like 12th to 19th at one point, and everyone was jumping about. I think it's hard to really pinpoint a place, but I don't want to sound too pessimistic, but I think it could be one of them where I think we're relatively safe fairly early, and then maybe just slightly take our foot off the gas. We do have a relatively thin squad compared to everybody else. We have the youth players, of course. Lewis Dobbin has featured occasionally in pre-season, but definitely not ready to be starting in and out of Premier League level. So if we can secure that safety, I can see us maybe slightly dropping off. I'm going to go for around a 15th, 16th, which don't get me wrong, I'd be delighted with. If we can stay up and not have to worry for the final few weeks of the season, if we're not watching, like Luton, Sheffield United, hoping for a draw or hoping for a Sheffield United win, that will absolutely do me as a season. And I can't see that happening, as you said about Dyche, that if there was ever a man to kind of sort us out in this mess, it absolutely will be Sean Dyche. And also, as you mentioned, that Burnley were never really in it on the last day. They were always quite safe, even though Burnley's positions, it did look like maybe retrospectively that they were a bit edgy towards the end of the season, but it never really was like that. It's quite easy to look at just positions and make that judgment. But Dyche had them safe more often than not. I mean, he also had them in Europe. I'm not sure we need to get too carried away about Europe this season, but just a bang average season where we're not kind of stressing over the final month that we might end up with the championship, not having to think about the potential repercussions that might bring. And thanks to that Decore goal against Bournemouth, we don't have to worry about that. And next, I want to move on to kind of key players, key weaknesses still left. I know we've discussed striker, and I think striker is the predominantly obvious one where we are showing some key signs of weakness. But I don't know if there are any other positions that spring to your mind.
I think what we need as well is wingers because we're going into the game on Saturday with no fit wingers at the minute. Dan Juma's got a bit of a knock. I'm hoping that he can somehow feature on Saturday. Dwight McNeil, we know, is injured for a few weeks now. So I think that's something we need to bring in, and I imagine it is a priority for Everton. But talking of wingers and key players, I think Arnaut Danjuma is going to be one of our key players this season. I think he's going to finally bring goals from the wing, which is what we need. We know that we've not always got a prolific striker fit in Dominic Calvert-Lewin, so you need goals from elsewhere. And I think Arnaut Danjuma is a goal-scoring winger, which is what a lot of our wingers aren't. That's the thing. Demarai Gray doesn't get you a load of goals. Dwight McNeil had a good flurry at the end of the season, but I think Arnaut Danjuma is that ruthless. He's got that goal-scoring mindset where he will get in the box and he will run onto things. And I can see on the break from if we play a low block quite often, I can imagine hitting him on the break, Arnaut Danjuma being played through, and he could get quite a lot of goals from that. So that's one of my bold predictions, actually. I do think he'll get 10 goals for us this season because I think he could be so crucial. And like I said before, I imagine it's one of the best loan deals you probably could have done at this point. What do you think of Danjuma?
I'm excited about him, but I'm nervous that he's just going to kind of be pigeonholed into the striker because obviously if Calvert-Lewin isn't fully fit, like Dyche is trying to say, and clearly playing a lone up top isn't the best that we can get out of him, but might be the best that we've got in that situation if Calvert-Lewin does kind of if he doesn't stay fit the entire season. We know he's come out on BBC Sports saying that he's fully ready. Dyche said that he's only be playing 45 minutes, so he's not ready for the full 90. But it's hard to see who else we would put there because I do not want to see Neil Maupay. I'm sure. I'm hoping nobody disagrees with me about that. I do not want to see Neil Maupay starting up top for us. So I'm excited about Dan Juma as long as we can actually facilitate him properly, having him come in off the left instead of playing him centrally. Maybe not 10 goals. I find it hard to kind of imagine anyone on our team scoring goals after last season. Not sure where they're going to come from, but Dan Juma could be a ridiculously key signing. And centre half is a position I think we're also still looking slightly light. I know there's been plenty of links with Harry Maguire. He might now look like he's off to West Ham. If they could stump up the 30 million fee, I'd imagine all the best we could do would be on loan off a half of his wages, which isn't a particularly attractive offer for Manchester United. But I think centre half is still a position that I am worried about. It looks like Mason Holgate's still seemingly going out the door. I thought that one might be wrapped up before the season. Southampton are now allegedly interested. Of course, Mina and Cody both left. So if you look at our centre halves, we've got Tarkowski, who's potentially injured. He's been given the vice captaincy this season. There's Branthwaite, who had that excellent season at PSV, but is he ready for a full season of Premier League football? Who knows? I'd like to see him because I think he does look like a fantastic player. And and we saw those glimpses of that before he went out on loan. But other than that, Ben Godfrey, is he going to start next to him? Is Michael Keane going to start next to him? I don't think centre half is an area of the pitch that I'm particularly overwhelmed with excitement about currently.
I think it's a difficult conundrum at the minute because as Branthwaite returns, you want to see him get minutes and you want to see him playing most of the games of the Premier League season. So if you bring a new centre back in, you don't want someone who will block the pathway for Branthwaite, but you also don't want that lack of depth in centre half. And obviously, with James Tarkowski getting injured in the friendly against Sporting, that obviously raised alarm bells. But actually, the week before, I was thinking, if you look at that defensive setup, if James Tarkowski did get injured, which he's not known for doing so, but it would be very typical if he did, then you're left with Michael Keane and Jared Branthwaite or Ben Godfrey and Jared Branthwaite. And you want someone to mentor Jared Branthwaite, a young player who's just returned from the Eredivisie. He hasn't played loads of Premier League football. You want a player who can mentor him on the pitch. And I think James Tarkowski's that. So if we were to buy another centre-back, I'd want it to be someone who can mentor Jared Branthwaite, but isn't going to take his place and completely block his pathway.
Yeah, that is a tricky balance for the club to try and find. I get, but my only problem is it doesn't seem like we're linked with too many centre halves. There have been these really tentative links with Harry Maguire, but it just doesn't look like a massive priority for the club at the moment. I mean, if at left back as well is another position. I know we just signed Ashley Young and Mikalenko. Obviously, he didn't seem to be able to cut it last season. We'll have to see if he can improve this season. I know we've seen Ben Godfrey out there, but we're also talking about how light we are at centre half. Can we be risking one of our only centre halves at left back in case he picks up another big injury? So I think we are still so light going into the season, which is why I'm very surprised that you've decided to put us 12th in your predictions. I think that is extremely bold. I am going to settle on 16th, which would be fine by me. I'd be more than happy with that. But I think we should also, before we round off the video, talk quickly about the rest of the league. So, well, where should we start? Top or bottom? We'll start with the top. Who do you think is going to win the title this year?
I think most people would agree. I think Manchester City are going to win it, but I don't think that's going to be the main story. I think it's going to be who's competing with them, and I don't think Arsenal will be competing as heavily as Liverpool will next year. Don't really want to say that on the Toffee Blues, of course I don't, but I do think Liverpool will be better than Arsenal this year. But once again, Manchester City are too good, and with Josko Guardiola coming in now, he's a player who's so good, so young, and is probably going to be the heart of their defence for years to come. And I imagine that's probably going to take City to a level defensively where they just can't be stopped. I feel like potentially close to the Jose Mourinho Chelsea team's level of defence. They will be that good. So for me, I can't look past them. What about you?
I'm going to have to go with City. I'm definitely not going to say that Liverpool are going to be their closest challengers. There's no way. There's no way you'd
Might
ever
get in
find me
trouble
saying
for
that.
that.
There's no way you'd ever see me saying that in a trial. I do agree that Arsenal might fall off. I just don't think it's going to be a particularly close battle this year. I mean, it was last year for a bit, and then of course Arsenal just massively fell off. I think the amount of money that they've spent, they should be up there. They should really be realistically challenging. They're not the plucky underdogs that maybe everyone thought they were last year, and taking everyone by surprise. The amount of money they spent, they brought in Declan Rice, Kai Havertz, Julian Timber came in, didn't he? You look at that kind of money spent, that if they're not challenging this at the title towards the back end of this season, then they've had a really disappointing one. But so we both agree that it's going to be City. Unfortunately, we disagree on who's going to be challenging them, but we'll move on swiftly from that. We both don't think that we're going to get relegated. So who makes up your bottom three?
I think two of them are pretty self-explanatory. I imagine most people agree. Luton Town and Sheffield United. I think it's easy to say it, but Luton have got a really weak squad, and the players that they've brought in appear to me that they're more so planning for the next championship season. So perhaps kind of getting the players in so that when they do go back down, they're in a better position than they were last season. As for Sheffield United, to lose Illiman and Dyer and now potentially Sander Berger in the space of 2 weeks, I think that is pretty much threatening the Premier League survival hopes completely. To lose two of your best players like that, it seems like they're just writing themselves off, and I can't see them staying up. And the rogue one that I've deliberated about quite a bit is Wolves. I think the club's in complete disarray at the minute. Sold two big players in Ruben Neves and Nathan Collins, and I think they're still sell to buy at the minute. And they've made some real mistakes recently with Mateus Cunha now having to come in on a £40 million obligation. And I just don't think they'll stay up, because usually when there's a negative atmosphere around a football club, that translates to the pitch. So Wolves are my final team to take the relegation spot.
Yeah, that is interesting. I do agree with Sheffield United. I think, of course, the rumours come out the past couple of days, isn't it? That Berger's off to Burnley, who are potentially another relegation candidate. That just seems like an absolute baffling move less than a week ahead of the season. So I will put Sheffield United to go down. I think Luton will go down, but I think they'll be a bit better than people expect them to. I think they're kind of coming up as a free hit. When you see teams come up with a free hit, they tend to have a good ride, but I think they will just fall short. As you said, they seem to have an excellent championship team. I thought that about Forest last year as well, that if they ended up going down, I know they spent so much money, but you looked at some of those players and if they do go back down at the championship, and it's not an unwise strategy, but you've just got to be realistic. There's no point in trying to spend massive amounts of money to try and bring in Premier League talent and then go back down with players on huge wages. They seem to have got a strategy about it, and you can't argue with that. I'm excited to see them. I mean, Luton, not a team I've ever particularly watched. Of course, we've had Sheffield United and Burnley in the Premier League before, but I will go for Sheffield United and Luton. I will agree with you on that. But my third team is going to be Bournemouth. I think that people are maybe expect them to have a really good season, and I can see why. I think towards the back end of last season they were fantastic. They of course then sacked Gary O'Neill, which I thought was an interesting strategy, and I think they'll be an interesting team to watch. I think that they're definitely going to be a high pace, high energy team, and that's always vaguely entertaining, even if you're not interested. But I can see them falling away towards the end of the season, but I think there will be quite a few teams in the mix. Like you said, Wolves, I think Burnley will end up around there. They haven't managed to bring in Nathan Tella from Southampton. He seems to be staying, and he was so crucial for them last season. I think we'll be in the mix for a bit, but I think there'll be any number of teams in the mix for a while for relegation. But yeah, so we agree on Luton and Sheffield United. I've gone Bournemouth, and you've gone Wolves. But that pretty much brings us towards the end of our predictions. We may as well drop one more bold prediction for the rest of the league. Ellis, have you got one for us?
I'm going to go with Fulham to be in a relegation scrap. I think there's been a few murmurs about this with Mitrovic potentially leaving, and there was a bit of uncertainty over Marco Silva a few weeks ago. That now seems to have subsided. Mitrovic, though, if he goes, then Fulham are in trouble, because last season, even with him, I saw that they were overperforming their expected goals. So it's going to catch up on you eventually. If you're a team that's kind of riding off a bit of luck, then it's going to catch up with you. And I think a team like Fulham are going to slip down the league this season. And without Mitrovic, their focal point, we know how important it is to have a focal point. We see our team when Dominic Calvert-Lewin's not playing, we really do drop off. And I think that's going to happen to Fulham. And for me, they could be in a bit of a relegation scrap. I wouldn't quite tip them to go down because they do have quality, but I think they'll struggle a lot more than people think this season.
Yeah, very interesting. I think the whole Mitrovic saga, and Silva's clearly made his position that he's not leaving, but who knows towards the rest of the season if his head could be turned. And they have brought in Raul Jimenez, who he was fantastic for Wolves, wasn't he? Obviously, since that really unfortunate head injury, he's not quite being the same, and he's definitely getting a bit older as well. But I do think it'd be interesting to see them in a relegation scrap. And for my bold prediction, I'm not going to give it any context or explanation. Liverpool will finish on 45 points. So thank you all very much for watching. Be sure to join us next time on the Toffee Blues. Me and Ellis are about to record another video on just a bit of transfer talk. Well, Chamiti hasn't quite been announced yet, but I'm sure he will be in a matter of time. But thank you all very much for watching, and join us next time on the Toffee Blues.